Hi, I'm Paulina Tenner, founder of GrantTree. Welcome to HumiliTea. Today, I'm talking to my partner in business and in life, Dan Tenner, and we'll be talking about giving up versus letting go. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Feels a bit weird. We're in our own home talking about business and our life.
Yeah, like we've never done that before.
Oh, no, never. Yeah, I remember those countless nights of like talking about business instead of just being present with each other. How does it feel to be here today?
Feels quite comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit of nervousness in my belly because like cameras and everything, which is a bit unusual in my living room. But yeah, it's quite obviously like it's quite a familiar place for me to be, and we have actually talked about business many times, so it's not that scary.
Right. You've made a decision a couple of months back to start withdrawing from GrantTree.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel?
It feels really good.
Okay.
There's a sense of letting go of something and making room for something new.
Right.
And it feels good that I'm able to do that in a way that doesn't destroy the thing I'm letting go of. At least I have reason to believe it's not going to be destroyed in the process of letting go of it. I think many founders, when they leave their business, usually they sell it and they have like it's sold to a larger company that's going to absorb that company into themselves, or they leave it with another CEO that might have completely different vision. Here it's I'm leaving it with some people that we've been working with for 4 years. I know them, I know they care about our culture, and of course I have no control over where things are going to be going, and I'm not under any illusions that things are going to continue in the same trajectory. In fact, I know that they won't, because that's the nature of GrantTree, that we do things, we change quite a lot. But I feel reasonably confident that I'm letting go in a way that's going to preserve, for a while anyway, a lot of the stuff that I care about that we built at GrantTree.
How did you know that it was the moment? It was the right moment to take a step back. Many people question themselves. Oh, I should give it another year. I should give it another 4 years. I should give it another 10 years. How did you know now's the moment, and how did you find the courage and the decisiveness to actually take those steps?
But to me, it felt like it wasn't really my decision. The decision kind of made me, rather than the other way around.
What do you mean by that?
So it's not like I was sitting there and considering all the factors and saying, okay, like now this factor has changed in this way. Okay, now's the right time. It's more that I had been sitting with the question of whether my place was in the business or not for a number of years. And when I first started examining that question, I decided, the decision that I made at the time was that I wasn't going to make a decision. I was going to sit with the pool of both of those options and just allow it to be there and let it be part of me. And then over time, things shifted, as they do. And in my personal development journey, especially over the last year, I became a lot more sensitive to how certain activities that I was doing at work were feeling to my body. And at some point, it became clear to me that I felt quite like, so a lot of my activity at GrantTree involved arguing with people, persuading them, inspiring them is the nicer way to put it, but there's a lot of persuasion, a lot of discussion with people where I'm holding one position and they're holding another. And what I started to notice as I connected more with myself was that that was quite bruising and quite painful for me. And my body, myself didn't really want to do these kind of activities. And I started withdrawing from some of those activities, trying to reshape my role to avoid those. But then at some point, it became apparent to me that one of the most important things that I think I was doing at GrantTree, which was holding the space for our unique culture, required me to engage in those fights, and that was not optional. That was not something I could say, oh, or at least I didn't know how to do it in a way that didn't involve some kind of struggle with other people. What emerged then was that my body wasn't consenting for me to continue doing this. If I had to, if there was no other choice, then I would have consented to continue doing this. But because there was another choice, it was like, okay, like I can endure the pain if I need to, but if I don't need to, then why am I subjecting myself to this? And once that dilemma became more obvious, it was like, it's not really a decision. It's like, if you have a choice to cause suffering or not cause suffering, and there's not really a significant difference between the two situations, why would you choose to cause suffering?
But how did you know that the net effect of those conversations, or what you call fights or discussions, was actually causing suffering? And how did you know that what felt difficult in your body, and the impulse that you had to withdraw, was letting go as opposed to giving up on something?
So I knew that it was causing suffering because I could feel it.
For
So
you?
this was my
Right.
suffering that I'm talking about.
Okay.
And so I could feel that when I was having those arguments, I would be in a more emotionally fragile state
Yeah.
afterwards. And very often the way I deal with this emotional fragility is that I get triggered into a kind of intellectual, more dry mode. And I could see that process happening.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't want to go and subject myself to this when I don't need to. Because yeah, my body doesn't like it, and I don't like, also in general, I don't like the fact that I'm being triggered into this kind of intellectual mode. I want to be more connected to myself. And so if I'm constantly putting myself in situations that are going to push me into that intellectual mode, then why am I doing that? If there's a good reason to do it, then sure. But if there isn't a good reason, then it makes more sense to step away.
And how did you know that it was a letting go as opposed to giving up? And what's the difference between the two for you?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't really considered the difference between the two.
Yeah.
I think there is a bit of both. I don't think it's like a letting go rather than a giving up. There's a part of it that's letting go, a part of it that's giving up. In fact, probably the giving up part maybe was the first bit, followed by the letting go, although it's kind of a messy relationship between those two things. I think there's a bit of both.
But it does feel different than like other businesses that you've let go of before. What's the difference? The Wubius.
Well, a big difference is that when I left Wubius, it was technically bankrupt, and I left it because it had no money. Whilst I'm leaving GrantTree with 38 employees, or God knows how many there is now, like probably 40 or something.
Yeah.
And like a bright future, lots of opportunities, lots of challenges, but it's a very dynamic, very alive organism.
Yeah.
Whilst Wubius was dying, arguably long before I left. So that's a big difference.
And given those feelings of discomfort in your body, would you say to people considering getting out of the businesses that they started to take that as a sign of whether or not it's good for them to continue? And how do you learn to read those body responses?
I don't think I would say to other people running businesses what they should do with themselves and with their businesses. Like, it's a very personal journey for each of us.
Yeah.
I don't think you can draw a map or like make a list of bullet points and say like, okay, like if this happens, then leave your business. I mean, that's something that maybe back when we started GrantTree, I might have written an article on my blog, like, here's the 8 signs that you should leave your business. But I don't think that makes sense. We each have a very personal journey. Like, business is a very personal thing. When you start your own business, it's a part of you. Most people identify very closely with their businesses. I think that to an extent, a lot of people project whatever mental health situations they have into their business.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean about that? And how did you project? How was the business your own cure?
So that's several questions there.
Okay. What do you want to start with?
So what do I mean by projecting your mental health? So I think and this is obviously my
Yeah.
perspective, and it's not an absolute truth by any means, but I think a natural state for human beings when they're in a place that's comfortable, like sitting on a couch or, in most of the Western world,
Yeah.
is a place of relative comfort and calmness, I guess. There's no tigers hunting us. We're not in danger of death. There's not really anything to be particularly afraid of. Yes, we want things, but like if we're like our desires tend to be fairly immediate. Yeah, I want to have something nicer right now, or I want to have a nicer meal, or I want to have a better boyfriend or girlfriend, or there's we have fairly immediate desires. Those I don't think leads to the kind of incredibly powerful drive that a lot of entrepreneurs have.
Okay. Interesting.
I think that, for example, to go and start a business and say I want to be the next Facebook, that's a level of ambition that has to be driven by something. There's some kind of really powerfully unmet need that the entrepreneur wants to fulfill, and they think that building a business that's the next Facebook is going to meet that need. Now, who knows, maybe in the case of one particular entrepreneur, it does meet that need. But I think in many cases, we substitute this kind of achievement of doing for a lack in our being. And that's something that I would calling it a mental health issue is a stigmatizing thing, because to an extent, almost all of us have mental health issues by that definition.
Yeah.
We all have fundamental unfulfilled needs. And when we unconsciously bring that into our business, we project that into the business, and the business becomes our externalization of this internal unmet need.
So would you say that all businesses are a result of a childhood trauma of some sort, or us wanting to prove something to ourselves?
I wouldn't necessarily say that all businesses are a result of childhood trauma. I think that would be a step really too far. I think, and I wouldn't say that all businesses are a result of trying to prove something to ourselves either, but I think a lot of businesses, and particularly in the startup world where there's a lot of ambition, tend to be about trying to prove something or trying to earn something rather. So trying to say, okay, if they kind of answer the proposition that if I'm X, then finally I will get Y. And X is something like I'm successful, I'm rich, I'm famous, I have a lot of employees, I have this, that. Like if I achieve this thing, then I will get this Y.
So did you have something like that, a picture like that, when we started GrantTree? Maybe
It was
not fully conscious, but
it was completely subconscious at the time. I didn't know what I was trying to
So
achieve.
at what point did it become conscious and you realized, aha, I'm actually trying to get this thing that will make me feel more worthy and like I deserve to be in the world?
I think mostly in the last year or so. I'd been digging into it quite a bit over the last 3 years, but it's in the last year I think that it started to come into focus, and I started to realize that I'd created, I'd pushed the culture towards being a place that was really accepting of people.
Yeah.
Because
everybody's worth is one of our values.
Everybody's worth is one of the values that I fought very hard for,
Yeah.
and that I really, really cared about and still care about. And that was because of a fundamental lack of a sense of worthiness inside of me. I actually started realizing that 2 years ago, actually, in my first cycling course, 2.5 years ago. But I started to really see the pattern of how that connected into childhood trauma in the last year. And that's when I realized, okay, actually, I wasn't creating this space for everyone else to heal. I was creating the space for me to have a chance to heal.
But then again, by fighting for this culture, but really wanting to see it out there, I would say you've created something beautiful. So what's the balance between, okay, like we need to be conscious that we are acting from our unmet needs or from our childhood traumas, but then again, the result of this could be something beautiful and something very good for other people.
I didn't say that we need to be conscious. Like
Okay.
I said, that I think that most businesses are started from a place of well, a lot of startup businesses are started from a place of unmet needs. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that. I mean, that
Yeah.
is the world that we live in, and of all the ways that you can try and meet your needs, starting a business, creating economic activity, creating profit, like creating jobs, maybe creating a unique work environment. Those are really lovely ways to do your self therapy.
So you said that there was a moment for you maybe around 2 years ago that as a result of some work that you did in yourself, you realized actually what I'm trying to do here with this beautiful culture and these values, I'm actually trying to meet a certain need that hasn't been met. So what changed for you? How was it different before when you weren't conscious of this? And after you've realized what it is you're actually doing and what motivates your actions?
So I think one of the things that changes that's really useful is that as you become more conscious of what drives you, you can also start to see how it's limiting your choices, how it's limiting the possibilities that you're willing to examine when you're looking for a solution to a specific problem. For example, somewhere hidden inside the everyone is worthy, there was a belief that I wanted everybody to be equal in order to be all equally worthy. And whilst I was unconscious, that blocked off a lot of possible solutions for structuring things like the share scheme that would have created some level of inequality. And the irony of it is that actually there was already inequality in the business because as a founder, I was
Yeah.
already different than everybody else. Like both of us were already different from everybody else. So, but the fact that I believe that no, everybody needs to be equal subconsciously hid that fact from me, but also hid all the potential solutions to, for example, partner share scheme that would have resulted in some kind of inequality. Now, being more conscious of that, of how the equality and the worthiness connect, I was then able to more easily see that, okay, so like what I'm trying to do is like the goal is to create a certain kind of environment that has a certain kind of impact on
Yeah.
people. And the equality is not the goal itself. And I can disentangle that and say, okay, like, I don't want to go and create, I still don't want to go and create a hierarchy with like, all the kind of crap that comes with having all these kind of multiple levels of hierarchy. But I can recognize that there is a use to saying that some people have a different status than others, so long as that's done consciously and, knowing what kind of impact you're trying to achieve.
And did it hit? I'm wondering, your inner idealist that believed actually I want to live in the world, or at least I want to create a little pocket of a world where we're equal. Did it hurt your inner idealist to realize actually this is not the reality? We're not equal.
That didn't feel like pain. It felt more like realization, seeing a truth that was already there, but that I couldn't see before I disentangled that worthiness and that equality belief.
So do you think when you grow and your awareness and consciousness expands, is it is there a cost to it, or do you think it could be like a softer transition when you just realize something and you're ready?
There's always a cost to growth and development. I think the example that I really like, I can't remember where I read, is that when you learn to walk, for example, you lose the ability to just be totally subject to the place where you are. When you learn to crawl,
Yeah.
like as a baby, you are where you are, and you don't like it's not something that you have control over. Once you learn how to crawl, you now have the ability to move around, but you no longer have the ability to just be totally subject to where you are. And there's always a loss with any kind of growth.
And what have you lost by realizing things like, oh, I'm just trying to meet my unmet needs? Or, oh, actually, it's not true that we're all equal. What have you lost as your consciousness expanded in the business context?
I think one of the things that I eventually lost over the last 2 years was the belief that this was going to be something that I would fix outside of me. Like there was a subconscious belief that I could fix all these problems that were really internal inside of me. And you experienced me trying to fix you as well as part of my my project to fix myself,
Yeah.
my subconscious project to fix myself. And as I became more conscious that, oh, actually, these are things that are internal to me.
Yeah.
These are things that are inside of me. It started to become less and less, or more and more pointless to try and fix them outside in my environment. I mean, the environment does play a part, and it was incredibly helpful as I went through this to be in an environment that I'd constructed to be friendly to other people's mental health, because it was also then friendly to my mental health. But ultimately, I'm not going to fix my issues around self-worth by building a business.
So do you think like businesses are all a giant project to try to fix something internal in the external environment?
I think that's a bit of an overgeneralization.
Yeah.
I think for many people, probably most, life is a project of trying to fix something. Like we have these kind of fundamentally unmet needs, and we try to get them met.
Yeah.
And for most of us, most of our life, for me still, I'm sure I have plenty of unconscious unmet needs. And we go and go and strive and like achieve and do all these things because we're trying to get those needs met. And business happens to be one of the ways that we do this.
So would it be fair to say that the moment you actually realize that that's what you've been doing all along, and you kind of can see this need like plain and clear in front of you, it's like, oh, I've created this culture because I wanted to feel worthy, actually, and to have an environment where I feel worthy.
Yeah.
That is the moment when you're ready to begin stepping away and maybe creating a different project to meet a different subconscious need until it becomes conscious.
Yeah, quite possibly. Like there's, and this is a very personal journey. Obviously, like each business owner will have a different way of approaching this. But for me, as I became more conscious that, okay, actually what I'm trying to do is to solve this need for worthiness, or this need for love, this need for safety.
Yeah.
And I learned how to do that internally without needing the business to be this way or that way.
Yeah.
And then combine that with the awareness that, okay, actually doing this thing that I was doing in the business was costing me something. This constant fighting was quite costly for me. The price became not worth the reward became not worth the price, because it's a reward that I can give myself more directly. Therefore, why should I pay this price to get it? Does that make sense?
Okay, so would you say that these days, now that you can generate the feeling of self-worthiness within yourself, as at least you're better at it, you no longer need the business to do it for you?
Would I say that?
And that's why you're ready to step away? Or that's why it no longer feels so urgent to work within the business?
It's definitely a factor, and it's like, one analogy that I like is that, so if you, like, we don't have children yet, but let's say you have a 5-year-old and they don't want to get on the bus. And you say, no, you have to get on the bus. I know you don't want to, and you're gonna be crying all the way, but you have to get on the bus. If you know that it's important for them to get on the bus, like, we actually really need to get on the bus because there are reasons for that are valid. There's no other way. We need to go to this place. The bus is the only way we can get there. We have to get on the bus. I'm sorry that this is painful. And it's okay to feel like angry that you're being made to go on the bus, but we're still gonna have to go on the bus.
Yeah.
That's a conversation I'm willing to have with myself if there is actually good reason for me to get on the bus. If my inner 5-year-old is saying, I don't want to get on that bus, I don't want to do this, and I'm like, well, I don't really need to, but I've been doing it for the last 10 years, so let's get on the bus. That's not an argument I'm willing to serve myself anymore. Like, if I don't need to do something, and it's something that that part of me doesn't want to do and feels bruised by doing, it doesn't make sense for me to do it.
Interesting. So,
or it's a kind of self-abuse almost, to force myself to do something that I like, an important part of me doesn't want to do, and there's no good reason for me to do.
And have you not thought that perhaps it's about changing the way you have conversations about culture, so it no longer feels painful in your body?
I did think about that, and I tried to spot a way that I could do that, and it doesn't feel like the answer that comes from within for me is that I'm not going to be able to do that at this point in my life.
So do you
Um,
think it's to do with your personal transformation, that you're
it,
maybe not yet at a level
yeah,
where you can do these things that serve the business in a
yeah,
way that feels effortless for
yeah. It
you?
could be that in a few years' time, I would
Okay.
come back to this and I'd be like, yeah, of course, I can hold this kind of space without fighting.
Yeah.
There's no fighting involved. There doesn't need to be fighting. But right
Yeah.
now, like the force of habit of having done
Interesting.
it this way for not just 9 years of GrantTree's life, but like it feels like it's been a way of life for me my entire life of fighting all the time.
So do you think on this journey of kind of self-discovery that entrepreneurship is, and I think we
Mm.
both agree, at some point you arrive at a place where you're like, okay, I've efforted my way through this for long
Mm-hmm.
enough, and I am now going to surrender and find kind of a flow of something that feels perhaps effortless, or perhaps just so aligned with where I am personally at this point. Do you think we're all searching for that, and at some point it happens, that changed in mindset?
I don't think I'd go as far as say we're all searching for that. That seems like an overgeneralization.
But as
But
entrepreneurs, let's say we become successful, and let's say we create the kind of businesses that we want it to. Do you think at some point you realize, oh, I just want to find a way to serve the world which feels aligned enough with who I am in this present moment, so it doesn't have to mean efforting or fighting for something?
I think that's true for me.
Okay.
I wouldn't extrapolate to anyone else because I don't know what anyone else's inner life is.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be that other entrepreneurs are very different, and maybe they are totally in integrity with themselves, trying to build the next Facebook. I don't know. I'm not them. I'm not their therapist. Like, we talk about an abstract entrepreneur. I don't even like nobody's their therapist because they don't exist. We just made them up. And but looking at entrepreneurs out there, just like other people, they're each completely different and each have their own motivations. Do other people feel the same way as I do? Possibly. How many do? I don't know. Like I haven't gone and done a survey or anything.
And what do you think it takes to, because I believe there's another way of creating projects, businesses, things in your life, and it's also something that I'm finding within myself. It's an ongoing process, but more than creating out of a sense of need, more or less conscious, it's more creating from a sense of abundance, and actually knowing within yourself, I am powerful, I am an abundance of love, worthiness, and creating out of the overflow of that. So what do you think it might take to be able to make that switch in your journey as a creative person? It doesn't have to be a business, it could be whatever else, from creating from a more or less conscious need to creating out of a sense of abundance and overflow.
So I don't know, first of all, because I'm still in the middle of this journey, maybe even at the beginning of this journey. So I certainly can't claim to have the answer to that. And I imagine even somebody who is near the end of this journey probably would say they don't have the answer to that. So, but if I were to speculate and try and guess what it might take, I think, and I might be completely wrong about this, but I think a clearer sense of what I want to bring to the world will be an essential component of that. So not based on other people's expectations.
And therefore who you are,
Yeah.
like deeply within yourself.
Yeah, and
Because you
this
can't
is a very,
give
it's a
something
very
unless you know
different,
who you are.
it's a very different mode of being than like, so as I said, like, my work at GrantTree has involved persuading people of stuff quite a lot. And that comes from a place of, okay, like, I need you to believe this stuff so that it works. Whilst I think a place of abundance or self-connection or self-belief or self-worth, I guess, would be more, I'm doing this thing. If anybody wants to join me, you're welcome. If not, you're also welcome not to join me. And I don't need you to join me because it's not about you, it's about me creating this thing, and I'd celebrate if anyone wants to join in that. But I don't like I don't need you to join me in order to validate that I want to do this, because I already know that I want to do this. Like, it's easier to see this with artists, for example. And it's not true for all artists, but there are artists where you can fairly well tell that they are doing their own thing. They don't really care if other people like it and stuff. They're not doing it to please other people. They're doing it because that's what they want to do. And then if other people love their new artistic direction, great. Like, that's not a bad thing. It pays bills. It allows more artistic creation in the future, etc. But they're not doing it for the audience, the fame, the appreciation, all these kind of things. They're doing it to fulfill an internal drive that they are connected to.
For sure, but don't you think it's also, business and art alike, isn't it a matter of finding a compromise between your truth and how it wants to be expressed and what actually resonates with the world enough for it to kind of create more ripples and more goodness in the world?
I believe that quite a lot. I'm not 100% sure anymore. And I don't know, as I said, I'm at the beginning of the journey, but I wonder if you have the choice between doing something that you feel 100% aligned with, and you know that this, not just because you're like, so there's a danger there, of course, especially, it will sound very pretentious, but especially early on in life, of thinking that you're doing your own thing when in fact you're just doing something different from everyone else, and you're actually still defined by other people, but just by your difference. That's not what I mean by doing your own thing. But if you're really connected to your own deepest desire of what you actually want to bring into this world, I don't think from that place it really matters that much how other people feel about this.
As I see also my unmet needs and how I wanted to find validation for myself in a kind of fellow group of entrepreneurs. I started out going to meetups and meeting all these geeks and wanting to be one of them. I'm still super grateful that this need manifested itself in this way and created something good in the world. I think it's beautiful.
I'm not suggesting that there's something wrong with this way of bringing yourself into the world. It's like, you did the best you could do. I did the best I could do, and it's created something wonderful. So that sounds good, and it's no longer where I'm at. Maybe it's no longer where you're at, or like you're transitioning as well in some sort of way. But there's life is change, and we don't need to, just because something was good 10 years ago doesn't mean it's still good today.
One really interesting topic to touch on would be us. So the other night, you said that, oh, I'm going to miss working with all of these people and all of these new people that are joining. They're like super interesting people. And I asked, well, do you also miss me as your partner or as your wife? And you said that you miss that more. So would you say that the reason the business is affected, our relationship, is also that this also plays a part in why you're transitioning?
I think so, yeah. There has been quite a cost to our relationship, as you're aware, of starting this business together. It's kind of dominated our relationship, and I'd really like to get back to having a relationship with you without the business in the way, without talking about the business while on holiday, while, like in the evening, in the morning, while brushing our teeth. Like, it feels like, because of where we were when we started building this business, we got really deeply entangled into both the business and into each other. And although we've tried very much, I think, over the last few years to disentangle ourselves from this kind of tangled mess there, it would be a lot easier when I'm not actually working day to day on the business. When I have a much more distant relationship, and it's just, it then no longer is something that ties us in this way.
Yeah.
And because one of the drivers for my journey in the business as well was, I wanted to get to a place where I could choose whether to work on the business. I have a belief, and I think is sustainable, that you're like, things like love or vocation or things like that are beautiful when you can choose to do them. When you don't have a choice, they become very distorted, slightly horrible versions of themselves. Like having a friendship with somebody because there is a friendship is great. Having a friendship with somebody because there's a law that says you have to be friends with them suddenly becomes this kind of horrible dystopian thing. Similarly for relationships with businesses, when you lose that freedom, you lose you lose a lot of the beauty and spontaneity of it. And so my hope, and I don't know, but is that as I disentangle myself from like those things that are tying us together, I can more easily choose to be with you, and we can more easily make that choice again, which we did freely make at the beginning, but which became, while we were running a business together and the business depended on us, did we really have a choice? I'm not so sure. And as we entangled ourselves into all this stuff, it became like, yeah, we don't really have a choice. We need to carry on.
Yeah.
And that's affected our relationship.
Yeah. So when we're about to start the business, a year into like dating each other, I just remember that most of our friends were horrified by it. Like, oh, you guys are going to split up. This is a really bad idea. And at the time, obviously the rebellious part of me was like, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be really okay. And actually, I remember before I met you, I somehow had the realization or vision, oh, my next boyfriend is going to be from that scene. He's going to be a startup guy. He's going to be an entrepreneur. So it felt right. And I also felt like, oh, it's going to be a crash course in relating because it's going to be intense. It's going to throw us into a cooking pot and we'll either survive or it will kill us as a relationship, which is fine, because if it does, then it probably means that sooner or later we would have learned these things about each other anyway. So what do you think we'd learned about each other in this cooking pot of running a business?
I think the business, I'm gonna start answering and see where it goes. I'm not quite sure exactly what the answer is to your question, but I think the business acted a bit like a child, in that it was a kind of a sort of joint project that you can't really get out of, and that goes, and because it's a sum of all your projections and all your problems and so on, it sort of like faced us with each other much more intensely than we would have if we hadn't had a business together. And I imagine having children does that as well to people.
So what do you think we gained by doing this together?
I don't know, because I can't run an A/B test on like what would have happened to us if we hadn't done it. But what I'm guessing is that it accelerated our own personal development separately very much, and also accelerated the development of our relationship. And maybe if we'd waited another 5 years and then had children, then maybe 10, 15 years later, we would be where we're at now, whilst maybe we halve the time to get to where we are, because we went straight into the most intense thing. I also think that if we had had children rather than a business, this sort of move that I'm doing now of disentangling myself from the business would have been much more difficult because you can't really disentangle yourself from your children in this way. And I think this move is part of the maturing of our relationship. So it may further accelerate things for us. Accelerate to where? I don't know. I can't see the future.
And the other side of that argument is, by doing this together, what have we lost? The other day we're thinking, have we ruined our marriage by starting this business? Probably not ruined it, but what have we lost? And what do you think there might be room for now that you're stepping away and I'm in transition also?
I think what we lost, I mean, the most obvious thing that comes up for what we lost is, again, what people lose when they have children, which is the freedom to step away. We no longer had that freedom, and and we were both already naturally, because of our age, because we were in our life, in a place where we were willing and we did actively build a codependent relationship at the time, because that's where we were.
Yeah.
And the business helped stick us right into that, like, very thoroughly. So what we've missed is the ability to continue to choose freely to be together. Like, maybe if we each had our own separate businesses that were successful and everything was totally fine and so on, and we didn't need to work together, maybe we would have continued to choose to be together freely each year, basically, and found that when we chose to get married, it was really a completely free choice, not driven by subconscious needs that might have been there in the sort of codependent entanglement. And so that might have changed the nature of our, like, in a way, it might have actually allowed our relationship to evolve faster, even if it might have caused us personally to evolve slower. I don't know, like, it's just a model that I'm providing here. What we might gain is to discover what it's like when we don't have to be together and we can actually choose freely to do that, because we know that we are both independent people who can stand by themselves, who don't need anybody in life, but then we still choose to be together. That's a much more powerful statement than, well, we have this kind of GrantTree child that needs us to stay together, so therefore let's keep it going.
But again, it clearly didn't get bad enough for us to choose to end the business partnership and the partnership in life. So, all things considered, I think I'm quite proud of us that there have been many tough moments and many moments where our intimacy as a couple definitely got sacrificed, and that we went through this, and also that we're now in a place where we can take perspective of it.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that there's a different phase of the relationship that's awaiting now. I look forward to it. And on giving up, what would you say to people that are looking to potentially give up on what they're doing in business? Is this something to be ashamed of? Is this something, how to deal with the possibility that giving up might be the best option?
There's many things to say there. I think the first thing I would say is that there's a sort of I'm not sure if you've heard, I know you've heard this expression, but like if you watch videos or read articles about consent and things like that, you'll encounter the phrase that a no is a yes to yourself. And
or to your own needs, which are different to the needs of somebody else asking you for something.
So it's not really about the thing outside, it's more about yourself. And so if you give up on something, it's probably because you're saying a yes to yourself in a different way. So you're saying no to this external thing so that you can give more life to this thing that you need. And that's the first perspective that I'd want to share about that. And then also another one, a very practical one, is that certainly my experience as an entrepreneur has been that it's still, despite that, very hard to give up, and partly because of society's projections and expectations, and the idea that, if you've left your business and it's not like exited for billions of dollars, then it's not quite successful or something like that. You failed, blah, 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 all that stuff. If I look back at my previous two businesses, for example, certainly the second one, Wubius, I'd say that I should have left it a lot sooner than I did. I should have, it was dead already long before I left. But it's very hard to say, no, this thing, to face the fact that something has actually ended. And I think most people who hang around in entrepreneur space, in startup space, will know some people, and I don't mean to offend those people, but will know some people who are working on an idea that they've been working on for the last 5 years or 10 years, which still hasn't taken off, and like it doesn't seem to be changing, but they're still kind of working on it. And I think there's like a lot of nobility and strength and courage in accepting that something isn't working and saying, okay, like this is no longer the right thing for me. Like maybe, you know, in another universe, it might have been a great thing, but I'm going to put it down and say, okay, this thing has ended, and accept the fact that this thing is over. And there's really great power to that, which is that it makes room for new things. So when you like even for something much more simple than a business, if you've got, like I had some plans of somewhere I wanted to be in September and October this year, and then I got turned down. I applied to go to this place and I got turned down. And at first I was kind of hanging on and like feeling a bit bitter about it. I was like, why, like, how dare they turn me down? Like, amazing. Like, they should totally want me to come to this thing. And whilst I hung on to this, I was still like keeping that space occupied and not really making room for anything else. And once I actually, ironically, like somebody told me, you know what, if you really want to, you could probably figure out a way to push yourself into that thing. And I thought about it and I thought, yeah, actually, probably I could. Like, I could try and find a way to really
Network
make it happen.
yeah.
And no, I don't want to. So I'll accept that I'm not going to go to this place. I'm going to give up on that. It's not as big a dream as a startup. I'm going to give up on that vision of me going to that place in September. And as soon as I did that, new ideas started arising about other things I could do at that time, and some really great stuff came up.
So do you think giving up, which is a difficult thing for a lot of people, can be a reason to celebrate creating space for something else, potentially something better to arrive?
It can be. That's one way to look at it. I find it difficult to celebrate at the point where I'm giving up. It feels more sad than a celebration. But it depending on the thing you're giving up on, depending on where it's at, it can also be a celebration just because of what you've achieved in the time that you did do this thing. Like, to some extent, I did give up on what I wanted to achieve at GrantTree by leaving. So, as any kind of entrepreneur with a vision, reality never matches up to your vision. So, like, what I wanted to do with GrantTree is somewhere up there in the clouds, and what I actually achieved is somewhere here with us. And so reality fell far short of my vision. And so I did give up on my vision and say, okay, like I'm gonna draw a line under this one, and I'm gonna, like, we'll see what else I'm gonna do with my life. And one way to look at it is, okay, I failed to achieve my vision that was up there in the clouds. But another way that you've pointed out also in this conversation is like, well, look at all the amazing stuff that I did achieve that's here with us. And that can be celebrated. Like, just because it's not the full vision that I had dreamed up doesn't mean it's not something that's good.
Do you think we can also celebrate, GrantTree should also celebrate the fact that now there is two different human beings stepping in with their vision, with the possibility of something completely different being created, which is not as much linked to our shadows and our unmet needs as it used to be?
That's very exciting. I like to think that GrantTree is currently in a really interesting place, where it has a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges. And it could go to all sorts of interesting places that I didn't imagine. Somebody else's clouds might become reality. And just because it's not my vision doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Okay, let's have a sip of tea, a little toast to the new future, the next phase of GrantTree, the next phase of our relationship.
Cheers.
Cheers.